when we had such serious crime that I would go to national meetings and people would look at my name tag and they would say, "Oh man, I wouldn't live there." And I go, "This is my hometown." And versus today, I was at a conference recently out in the West Coast, and people literally, these are the international people attending these meetings mostly, but they will kind of queue up at a cocktail party. I don't even know these people. They don't know me at all. They just see my name tag says Miami on it, and they want to hear more about what they've already heard about. I tease them. I said they know more maitre d's in Miami than I do, because when they come here, they're out having a good time, and we just offer a great presentation for anybody who's coming here for any reason. Back in 1999, 2000, 2001, we kind of forget that we built 10 4- and 5-star hotels in that brief little, like 24-month period. And those hotels, the hospitality industry. Is anybody in here in the hospitality industry? Yeah, there are a few. Well, thank you guys for what y'all do, because you're the first contact that we have with so many of the people that we work with. We live in a marketplace that deals with a lot of second home buyers. Right now, just our international buyers represent 27% of every sale that we make, and these are stats that come out of our Realtor Association numbers. But those numbers are giving us a little concern, because 2 years ago it was 35%, last year it was 31%, and now it's 27%. And Brian did a great job talking about the exchange rates, and I have some of those here for us to look at in a second. But when you're an Argentine who 7 or 8 years ago, their money was buying 3 times more than it's buying today, just the exchange of their money. Forget about the fact that we've increased our prices. And so at some point we knew that it would slow down some of that buying power, and it has. And but the good news is that, and I've told a lot of reporters here in the last couple of years that the big story to me is that the American buyer has returned to Miami. And just like I told you those stories earlier, when people just would not come here. We could not sell anything to an American buyer here because they were afraid to come here. And I had friends in Tennessee that still were, "Oh my gosh, how do you live down there? We come down there, we're afraid. We just come down there when we have to." And of course today, totally different story. People can't wait to get here. In fact, I was at a meeting in Minnesota, which that's an interesting place. It was 39 degrees there last week. But anyway, I was at a meeting there last week in Minneapolis, and one of the ladies that was at the meeting said, "Oh, my husband and I love coming to Florida every season." And she said, "We have always gone to Fort Myers." Now, Fort Myers is a little slow. I hope it was from Fort Myers, but it's a beautiful place. Coast over there is gorgeous. After the early bird dinners are over, then everybody goes home. But I think that one thing she told me, she says, "This year my husband and I are coming to Miami." So she was all about asking me where to go and where to stay and all. So everybody, literally, pretty much across the globe now, has heard about what we have and wants to come here. But I think that when we saw that change happen was when the arts came to our community. It had begun building. 2000, the 80s, the 90s were a tough period. We had Hurricane Andrew, in 92. A lot of money came into the community then to build some of our local communities, but we really didn't start building in the high rises on the beach and downtown until about 01, 02. Very sparse development. But then by 03, 04, 05, we all remember what happened, and of course we became ground zero where everything went wrong in Brickell Avenue. Even in Brickell Avenue today, it is predominantly a second home market or an investor market. And that concerns us a little bit. We'd like to see more people living there, and it's slowly happening, but very slowly. If you look at the homestead exemptions in the Brickell market, the Brickell downtown market, only about 8 to 10% of the units have homestead exemptions, which is a good clue that those are all either second homeowners or investors. Peter Zalewski, who was a part of this with Anita, and you've probably already heard him speak somewhere here in the last couple of days. Peter loves to talk about, and it's funny and it's true, he says, New York trades stock, Chicago's trading options, and in Miami we trade condos. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that because of some of the things Brian talked about. We have so much flight capital that's still coming, less than we had because of the currency challenges. But we have a lot of people who just want to get their money into a secure place, and what better place to put it than real estate. When I came here in '75, we were selling Brickell Place condos, Brickell Place 1, Brickell Place 2. Those buildings were built in 74, 75.
A long time ago.
Yeah, like a long time ago. I've been here a long time. In fact, my partner and I sold Brickell Key when it was vacant. So, until you walk the perimeter of a 44-acre island in July, you don't know how hot it is here. And I was the youngest guy on the staff at that time, and they said, okay, you go out there and show the property today. So, but when you look back to that year, we were selling Brickell Place condos for $65,000, and amazing. And my partner probably, has a right to kind of take credit for the Latin American business coming here, but there's no way to really confirm this. But he had a banker from Caracas who came here to look at Brickell Place 1. And, sales were, in fact, the first developer went under. The second developer was a Cheesa development company that took it out of bankruptcy from the first developer. And they worked with the lender that had it at the time to finish the building for Brickell Key 1 and 2, and then they built 3 and 4 on their own. But this banker came from Caracas and said, I think maybe I'd like to buy this unit. And so, of course, we were very excited. So my partner said, which is probably today illegal because it's like a kickback, but he said, hey, if you'll bring your friends back here, I'll give you $1,000 off your unit for every buyer you bring back. The guy paid $65,000 for his unit. He brought back 85 friends from Columbus. So we were thinking, my gosh, how many more people are down there? There's probably a lot of people down there. And of course, even today, Venezuela's had such rough times, and I know probably several of you in the room are from there or have family or friends there. Our office in Weston probably has more Venezuelans in our office than percentage-wise than any of our other offices. And of course, I'm sure y'all have all heard that Weston is referred to as Weston Layla, and a lot of great people that live there. But we continue to sell a lot of Venezuelans in that market, even though it's very difficult to get money out. I guess most people have already gotten their money out if they're paying a black market price, then they're obviously taking a real hit on their money. But we are seeing still, Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, those countries have still been our predominant buyers for the whole industry, not just our company. Our Realtor Association tracks a lot of great data. The data is only as good as the ones of us putting in the answers to the questions. We are tracking now about 60% of all of the sales for the brokers to tell us where those buyers are coming from. And I mentioned earlier that Argentina, Venezuela, and Brazil are still the 3 leading countries. But we're seeing some others coming up pretty strong. And one noticeable country that we're seeing coming down is Canada. And of course, Canada, you think about a very stable place. But if you haven't checked the currency here in the last few months, their currency is down 20% against the dollar. Well, Canadians were very accustomed forever to, maybe a few pennies here or there difference, but you can travel across the border and it really didn't make a difference. Well, today it cost them 20% more. Of course, reverse for us, when we go up there, we get a nicer hotel room, more food, or whatever we're spending our money for. So the Canadians pulled back pretty fast to say, you know what, this is not going to be like this for very long. We're not going to buy anything there. We'll just stay up here for a while. So that has hurt, not so much in Miami, but up in Fort Lauderdale and Boca and those markets where where's that? Hollywood. And, pretty much anything north of the Dade line, you've seen a noticeable change in that. And New York is up 15%. And of course, if you analyze that, it's probably a lot of Wall Street. Our company had the privilege, I guess, or the pleasure of selling 20% of the units at the Faena building, which those are all closing right now. Most of them have already closed. There are only 42 units in the Faena building. Originally started out as 47, and we combined a couple, and so we sold 9 of the 42 units. Every one of our buyers, with the exception of one, was from New York, and all of those worked in Wall Street. So you see the benefit of some of our policies in Florida. Our tax and no tax has been a huge boost for us. We sold a home a couple of summers ago to a man from California who had a sizable business, and California and New York now, if you make over $400,000, I think it's the number, maybe somebody else here knows the exact number, but if you make over $400,000 a year, your top tax rate goes up to 13.2 or 3%. So for every extra $1 million you're making, you're paying a lot, 13% more tax on top of your federal tax. So this man bought a house from us for $8.6 million. And he said, this house is not costing me anything. And I said, well, how's that? He said, I paid the state of New York, or state of California last year, $1.3 million in additional tax that I will no longer pay. So that's just like found money to me. And so we're hearing that from more and more people. And there are only 7 states in the country that don't have a state income tax. And of course, we are one of those, and probably the one that's most recognized. There are a couple other big states that don't have it either, but we're drawing a lot of people just for that reason. So, and then I mentioned earlier, and I kind of got sidetracked about when the art world hit here. Art Miami was kind of the precursor to our contemporary art world. They have celebrated now 25 years of hosting the Art Miami show in Miami. They were the first ones to do that. But then when Art Basel came to town, I guess it's been now 15th year this coming year, I can't remember now, 14 or 15. But when they came here from Switzerland and opened up the Miami show, instant success. And the number of people, the number of wealthy people, I mean super wealthy people, uber wealthy people that have come now because of that has been mind-boggling. I would have never guessed, what impact that would have. Again, you got to remember, I grew up in Tennessee. We didn't have a $500,000 house in the whole town. We didn't know there was another currency besides the dollar, and so we just never thought about these things. But now that I've been watching it, our parent company owns NetJets. This is the largest private aircraft company in the country, or the world it is. And they told us now for the last 2 years, they have had more private aircraft on the ground at one time in one place than any Super Bowl, any other event in the world. Have had more private aircraft on the ground during Art Week in Miami, that first week of December each year. So these last 2 years, they've had 200 private aircraft on the ground at one time. They only own about 500 private planes, but that many people that have that wealth want to be here that week. And of course, if you're on the roads that week, I mean, we all know what a congested week that is, but it's a fun week. It's kind of grueling at the end of the week because we're all involved in so many things that week. But that has brought a new attention, a new spotlight on our marketplace that I don't think we would have had without that. Okay, last thing before I get into some of these numbers is our retail. I would argue that our retail offerings today are probably greater than anywhere in the world. And we're beginning to hear that now from people. Now, I guess the French would never say that, but I think a lot of people now are recognizing that any high-end brand, if you haven't been to what's happening on 40th Street, 39th, all the things that DACRA's doing there in the design district, it's amazing at the high quality of those stores. And of course, you come 2 miles south at Miami World Center, you're going to have Bloomie's and Macy's, and another 2 miles to Brickell City Center with Saks and all those new stores that are coming there. And there are a lot of stores in the design district that I don't even recognize the names. I can just tell they're expensive by looking through the windows. And I think that we will continue to draw people for our shopping. Macy's now has 800 stores in the country. Their top 2 volume stores in the nation are both in Dade County. Dadeland is number 3, New York is 1, San Francisco is 2, Dadeland is 3, and Aventura is 4. Aventura is now the 2nd highest traffic mall in the nation. 28 million people a year go through the mall, and of course they're adding about 250,000 square feet to it right now. So it just seems like there's just an endless limit to what the consumer is looking for. Okay, let's talk about these numbers for a second. Am I okay with time here, or you just tell me when to sit down? This first sheet is a 10-year look, 12-year look at where we've been since 2002. You don't even have to like numbers to understand this sheet. You can just look at the picture that it gives you. And you can see that back in 2002, we were selling the same number of condominiums as we were single-family homes. On this sheet, the purple line is the sales of condos annually. The green line is the sale of single-family homes annually. And you see back there, right as we approached 2003, we started to shift, and condos moved ahead in sales, and single-family moved below. So, and we maintained that balance. I mean, we got a little closer down there in 2008, but we are a condo community now, not just here. Broward's the same thing, and we're about 55% condo sales, 45% single-family sales. Every time I say that, somebody says, well, gosh, does that mean single-family is losing value? No, really, quite the contrary. I mean, they've all become like collector's items because you just can't build anymore in the places where people want to build an expensive single-family home. We just resold a house on North Bay Road this year. We sold public record. Phil Collins bought the house for $33 million. We sold that same house in 1985 for not even quite $2 million. Now, they did a lot of things to it, but the basic house is still there. But it's that North Bay Road address and the view that you look back at the skyline. And I think
2 years before that for 17 years.
17, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's just in 2 years what it did in just those 2 years. So anyway, this red line shows the inventory of condos during that awful period that none of us want to remember, that, you know, the recession period of that 07-08 when inventories just ballooned out of control. And then the blue line are single family that also ballooned out of control. You see where sales dropped. You know, if you go back into those numbers in the chart below, you'll see that in that 07-08 period, we literally dropped in half. And we've been selling about 26,000 units a year as an industry, and it dropped to 13,000 a year. And the good news is that once we got out here to 2011, 12, 13, those were all record years. 11 was a record, 12 was a record, 13 was a record, 14 was about the same as 13, but it looks like 15, if we continue on the path we're on, it won't be a lot of increase, but we're going to sell more units again. And again, you have to remember that these numbers come out of the MLS, so this does not include much of the new construction. So you can add all that to it. Of course, you need to add all that inventory to this as well. The reason we like this chart, we call it facts and trends, is because it gives us a good look at the trend of where we're going. I mean, we guesstimate that this is probably somewhere between 60 to 65% of the entire market going through this, because it does not include the sale to your next door neighbor without a realtor, and it's everything that went through the MLS. But it's a large enough sample that everybody agrees that it's a good trend. Now, if you look down at the bottom, there's some blue lines and red lines at the bottom. Well, that blue line are the single-family sales over this period. And what I want you to look at are the percentage increases and what we were dealing with. In 2002, you see that the median price of a single-family home in Dade County at that time was $189,000. The next year, it went up 22%. The next year, it went up 24%. The next year, it went up 28%. And then all of a sudden, we hit this 06 period. And again, we had more hurricanes at the end of 05. The hurricanes did not start the recession, but they had accelerated it. We had 3 hurricanes in a 65-day period from the end of August to the 1st of November in 2005, Rita, Wilma, and Katrina. And while those hurricanes were not as destructive as Hurricane Andrew, prior years before, they were very disruptive because we didn't have electricity for a lot of the time. During that 65 days, if you were here, you probably remember, we didn't have electricity for 17 days of those 65 days. So a lot of people just left. They just went to Orlando, Disney World, or wherever they went. But it accelerated our market beginning to drop before other markets around the country started dropping. Our company has 33, our parent company owns 33 companies like ours around the country. And I remember we have these conference calls every other week, and of course I'm having to report that, oh my gosh, our sales are just diving, and they're going, what are you doing down there? We're all selling fine, And it was probably 9 months later, 10 months later, I remember one of the conference calls, the guy from North Carolina goes, Sheffield, is this what you've been talking about? He says, our sales just stopped. And of course, that's what happened, toward the end of 06. And of course, by the time we got to the beginning of 07, the whole world recognized that there's a serious problem. And then of course, 7 and 8, the closings and the job layoffs and all the different things that happened during that period. We still are about 35% below the peak price for a single family home, which occurred back here in 06. You see $374,000 was the median price. Today we're at $247,000. Now, I always try to remind people that everybody didn't pay the peak price. If you really kind of analyze what was selling during that period, those peak prices, those were the people who just either weren't watching or didn't catch on. But probably about 15% of the sales that happened during that period paid that peak price. And so a lot of people still, made money that bought, prior to that because, we're up so high now. If you go into Brickell Avenue, downtown, and you look at what people were paying in 09 to today, from 9 to 15, so, 7 years later, no, what is that, 6 years later? So 6 years later, they have doubled their money. Most of the people doubled their money in Brickell and downtown in about 5 years. And, so they got most of that gain a year ago. I mean, we've actually been kind of leveling off this past year. I remember the first buildings that really acknowledged that there was a problem were 1050 Brickell, 1060 Brickell, Brickell on the River. The Icon came quickly after that. And the developers and the lenders of those buildings just said, look, this is not going to turn around overnight. So they literally dropped the prices in half. 1050 Brickell had been selling, they actually closed out half of the 500 plus units there for about $385 a square foot. And from Friday to Monday, they marked down the other half of the building to $190. And of course, people were still afraid to buy. We sold some units at 1050 Brickell for $145 a square foot in 09. Now, here we are, 6 years later, I mean, look at the profit people have made. So, you know, as I look back, I mean, that's why I don't ever get nervous about long-term holds of property here, because we have only 18 miles of dry land from